All together now. Happy birthday. Guess who turned 4 today? That's right, Mr. Colossus. Well, Barba. That's what his friends call him. The 6th Colossus. Yeah, 4 years. This is Thanksgiving of 2016. God willing, this is the last year he's being worked on. And, or Dorman willing, as the case may be. Wow, this is, never thought I'd be here 4 years later. But here I am, 4 years later. So, I guess, as is the new yearly custom, I'm going to do a State of the Union address. I kind of feel like I'm just now starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. I took the entire month of December off my job so that I can focus on nothing but my delightful toddler, Barba, here. I really want to finish him this year, and I'm doing everything in my power to do so. He's roughed in. I feel like I know how to do everything else that I need to do, with the one exception of the fur. The fur is going to be yet some more experiments, but all the stuff that I haven't done before for this kind of project, I've gotten through. Even this ridiculous tile floor / birthday cake here. I did everything completely wrong on it. I mean, I'm going to be fine with the end result. It's the getting there process that I would do completely different now. There's so many mistakes that I made. I started with a handmade tile that wasn't necessarily perfectly square. I made an 8x8 grid of tiles from that mold, and I didn't make sure that was entirely square. And it's very close, but not quite there, and so I ended up with all sorts of wonky lines, which is okay because I was trying to make this like a very heaved ground, a very old, very ancient ruin kind of ground. That's definitely how it ended up. If I wanted this to be like a pristine castle or like something that's only a couple hundred years old, this would not have done the trick. So if I were to do it again, I would use pre-made tile from the hardware store. I would have broken it up. I would have added all the various texture and oldness to it afterwards, because then I would know that I'm starting with the perfect grid. Identical sized pieces. Honestly, even laying these down individually rather than in grids of 8 probably would have ended up saving me time. It's ridiculous how much longer this took me than it should have. Anyway, so when you make your Shadow of Colossus platform, don't follow my example. Yeah, so, and let's see, covered hair, paint, I know how I'm going to do his skin, I know how I'm going to do, I've decided I'm going to 3D print Wander to go on the top of his head, so I feel pretty good. I'm 50% confident I could get it done when I spend an entire month focusing on it like a laser, which is what I will be doing. So, yeah, I guess all that's left now is to blow out the candles and get back to work. Ready, buddy? Ready! And blow. Good boy. All right. Back to work. Alright, so we got the platform base coated. As you saw, I used a couple different textures out of cans, just for variety's sake. Probably didn't need it. And I got a little hasty. You can see on the bricks where I used the hammered metal, this stuff, hammered paint for plastic. I waited maybe overnight, maybe it was only several hours. I think it may have just been over the course of an afternoon before I sprayed the black paint over it, and it apparently hadn't set up all the way, because you can see it's still a little shiny and tacky. When you press on it, the paint comes off. So that is something that I've always regretted not doing anything about in the past, whenever I didn't do anything about it in the past. So this time I am going to do something about it, which is I'm going to use some mineral spirits, aka paint thinner, to brush those areas off and get all the paint off. So what can happen if you leave that to sit is that it, for whatever chemical reasons, it literally will never set and will always be just a tacky, gummy spot, which means, you know, if dust gets on it and you try to dust it, it's going to pull little fibers off of your duster. And if you use a blowing device to blow it off, it's not going to take the dust off because it's stuck to that paint that will never dry. So, yeah, if you basically strip it down with paint thinner, then I can just go over it again with something else after that's totally dry. I'm going to give the paint thinner a good day before I go over it with paint again. Which is certainly obnoxious when you're like feeling like you're really making good headway and things are finally chugging along, and then you have to stop. But that's just part of quality control, I suppose. You make sacrifices for quality. Let's see. I'm not seeing any other spots where that happened. That's interesting. I know I used that hammered stuff on, I don't know, 20 or 25 bricks. And I'm only seeing it right there. It could be because that's where I piled it on the thickest. I varied it up. In some areas, I really layered it on for like a full second or two blast straight onto the brick. And others I just kind of passed over quickly. And it looks like the ones that were quicker set up fine. So there you go. So lesson number 2. So that was painting pro tip number 1, is when stuff is tacky, wipe it back down with paint thinner. Don't mess around, don't ignore it. You'll regret it later. So painting tip number Z is, this should really be number 1. Do tests first. On everything you do, do tests first. So I have these extra bits that I gave the same pre-treatment to, and now that I'm ready to start experimenting with all the weathering techniques and products that I have that I haven't ever actually used before, I watched some videos and tutorials, so hopefully I'm not just randomly flailing around, but I definitely want to do some experimenting to try to find out what's going to work best for the subject matter that matches the game as closely as possible. While I was at the hobby store, I found this talus in gray, kind of gray through black, which is really nice. I wish I would have had that to begin with. I was been using all this, brownish stuff, sand and pebbles and stuff, and that's not the color in the game. The game is pretty much just black and white for the most part. I'm absolutely going to include subtle shades in this. I'm not going to literally only use black and white. But this stuff will be very nice for scattering. After I do all the weathering and paint, I'll glue some choice pieces around with this stuff, and I think that'll really bring it all together, is my hope. Okay, so let's see what we have here. The first new product that I'm trying is this weathering powder. So this is essentially a pigment, meaning that, so paint that you get out of a can is water and pigment and medium. And this is just the pigment. So you can see it here, it's powdery stuff. And you can mix it with water and put it on your surface, but because there's no binder or medium in there, once it dries, once the water evaporates, then you are left with powder again, and it can just be brushed or blown off or whatever. But from what I've seen, that's really good for simulating dust and you know, dry, broken up rocks and stuff like that. So I got a variety of these in a variety of colors. I'm going to be doing some mixing and matching to try to get I definitely want to get a subtle earth tone in there. Just very subtle, maybe between the cracks, you know, like there's actually dirt here between the stone rock. So the stones will be gray, but the dirt will be brownish gray. We'll see. That's what these tests are for. And then the other thing I got is a shade, which I'm very unconvinced about this product. Why you would pay a lot extra for what's essentially watered down paint, I don't know. We'll see what the difference is. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to start experimenting with. I also need to experiment with how wild I want to get with the different tones that I want to bring in to the gray. I got some gray primer. This is the official, you know, this is what miniature users use. This is one of the name brands. Another one is another overpriced name brand one is this Formula P3. And then there's that other stuff that I think I ran out of that's got like a cartoon of a nerdy kid on the front. So yeah, I'm gonna do an experiment where I spray gray over it first. I think I'm gonna do a spray experiment on this one. I'm going to do a dry brush experiment with this one, and I'll see where those lead. And then after I know whether I want to do spray or dry brush, I've got these two that I can do, whichever of the two worked better, and then experiment further from there. So here we go. First off, let's do a little spray. So the pro of using spray paint to lay down the base color is that it's very fast. One of the cons is that it's going to get into the cracks more than a dry brush would. But we'll see. I'm gonna do it lightly and see what happens. Yeah, I think that's not quite 50% gray. That's maybe 6. Well, let's see. It's darker than 50% gray. So whichever direction you take that, maybe it's 60% black. I don't know. However you want to measure it. That's about where I landed, and that's fine. I mean, no matter what, I'm going to be dry brushing this somewhat. I've just I'm unconvinced about dry brushing as well. I've seen it done poorly a lot. And I've done it myself poorly a lot, and I'm not super convinced that it's the way to go. The other thing is you can make it fully bright and then use the shade or a wash to darken the crevices and stuff. So that's basically, I'm experimenting. Do I want to go from medium and then add the light and add the dark? Do I want to go straight from dark to medium and then add light? Or do I want to start at light and add the medium and the dark? There's all those different directions you can go. And as far as I know, they're all valid and they all have their pros and cons. That's why I'm experimenting. So I think I'm gonna mix together just some black and white to get some basic gray. And I'll have that on a palette so that I can experiment with different color ranges. Remember, when you're trying to make gray, you want a lot of white and a little bit of black. You just add the black in incrementally. You definitely don't want to do like 50% black and 50% white, because that will turn out pretty much black. Okay, so you can see that's a slightly lighter tone than this. And it's a fairly warm gray, which is good because, like I said, I want to introduce some earthy browns to it. So ideally your gray is going to work with that, and if it was a cool gray, like if it had blues mixed into it, it would look, it tends to look unnatural. Like in general, in the real world, especially really old places, in nature and in ruins and stuff like that, a lot of those colors tend to bleed together because minerals are leaching from the soil into the rocks, and from the rocks into the soil, and from leaves, and just all this kind of stuff builds up and kind of whooshes together to a certain degree. So I think it looks best to go with warm grays if you're going to have dirt and stuff like that. Okay, and for dry brushing, you want to get most of the paint off of your brush. Let's see, I'm going to do this dry brush straight onto the black first so we can see what kind of a difference we have there. Now I'd say probably if I was going to dry brush with no spray paint first, I would start with the darker gray, because having black darks that go straight to, you know, what is this, like a 30% light, 30 gray, then it reads as pretty unnatural. You want to have a smoother transition. That's why I'm kind of digging this into the cracks a little bit more than I should for an optimal effect. So yeah, I think 30% white like this, or let's see, I'm gonna settle on a nomenclature here, okay? I'm gonna say 10% gray is like almost white, and 90% gray is almost black. All right, I think that's how it works. I think that's how it is in Photoshop. It's probably in the printing world. I don't know. But that's from now on. When I say 30% gray, that means pretty light like this. All right. Yeah. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to mix in a little bit of black on one side here. I want to turn this into more like a 60 or 70% gray. Okay, so I'm going to try that on this guy. You can see the difference in tone there. Say that's about 30, that's about 60. And so now it shouldn't be quite as stark between the darkest dark and the lightest light. You can see the difference there. And then once you, I'm not bothering to wash my brush because it all is just kind of mixing together, and that's fine. Now I'm going to put some of this 30% on there. Load it up real good. Okay, and I'm going to do a really light whatever that word I've been using, dry brush. A really light dry brush with this much lighter one. And just kiss the tips. Just want to get the peaks barely brightened up. You can see the difference there. So this one is obviously a lot more dramatic, right? Like you see the very stark black lines and you see the light tips, and that probably reads fine from a distance, but when you get up close it looks illustrated, like it's graphic art rather than like real stone. And I think this is a lot more realistic looking. It could still use some more. Let me add just a little more highlight in there. Oh, see, that was too much. So this has the same brightness of highlights on it, but it's more subtle because they're blended with a better mid-tone. I know it's in the miniatures community, it's definitely a stylistic thing to do this kind of very graphic approach, but I'm not doing a wargaming tabletop here. I'm trying to make like a realistic diorama, like photoreal. So, and I'm not taking this really far as like getting in there with the details, because I still want to do my my shades on there. All right. So for this one, I'm gonna keep this one virginal for now and continue to explore with these a little more before I touch that one. Let's look at some shades. So by a shade, I mean a gray that has a little bit of, just a kiss of another color in it. So I'm wanting to do earth tones, which means I want to do reds, oranges, yellows, and I want to stay away from greens and blues. No, we do not want metallic. Yeah, and these are obviously super cheap paint. Some of this I got at a garage sale. It could literally be like over 10 years old for all I know. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a basic gray batch, and I will distribute that to a couple different containers and mix in the other colors. Okay, that's 40 to 50%, so that's right where I want it. And alright, so see, I literally put one drop of that crazy orange in there. And once it's all mixed together, I end up with a much warmer gray. So I'm happy to say I don't want to do this style, therefore I'm safe to paint over it. So gonna go ahead and, so you can see a clear difference here between the grays. You wouldn't say this is orange, but it is tinted orange. To keep track, I'm gonna do this. That's probably a good way to do that. Maybe if I keep them in the configuration, I'll be able to keep track. Okay, let's try. Oh, this is acrylic gloss. Oh, well, we're experimenting, right? It's interesting. Okay. Now we've got a parchment colored. Oop. I think since this one is already pretty subdued, it's okay to mix in more of the color with the gray. I'm putting these on much thicker than I will put on the final one. Partly because I'm trying to cover up the color that's underneath it. Although I probably shouldn't, because realistically I wouldn't be doing that. So let me try this again. I'm gonna go over the ones next to them with a more of a dry brushy brush. I think I will use a little bit of water now because they're starting to overlap a little too much. And the orange gray comes next. Alright, what else do we have? We have brown. All right. And finally I've got some mystery sort of rusty rose color. Whoa, that's way too much. Let's try that again. These two are very close. But this one is a little more peachy, orangey. And this one's a little on the more purpley, pinky red side. So overall, they tend to. Maybe it's just the red ones are jumping out at me as looking kind of pastel, and I probably want to avoid pastels. It might also be too bright. Let me look at my reference for these bricks. So, in the pictures that I have, it's hard to tell because the way this printer printed them out, I'm seeing a lot of like greens and purples in there that I don't think are in the game. I think I need to just go look at the game footage again before I make any more color decisions. Although before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and do the same process on the spray painted version. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to water this down significantly. Rather than doing a lighter dry brush, I'm going to try to make my own tint with just water and acrylic paint. See what happens. Now, the problem when you water down your paint is that it's going to sink into the crevices and make the crevices lighter than the peaks, which is generally the opposite of what you want. So that may not work. But it is more of a tint on the brick. And once I put a shade over it or a wash with, you know, my dark brown or black, will probably do what I'm wanting. Let's see, I'll just continue that scenario with these other colors and see what I get. It certainly is more subtle. Yeah, I think what I need to do is just let it sit, walk away for a little bit, and come back and see how I feel. I'm trying to think if there's any other tests I can do right now. Well, I can try this the shade. Well, that certainly does give it a earthy tone. This color is Seraphim Sepia. We do not have a black, although it looks like this is pretty much identical to, what is this stuff? Quick Shade, which, yeah, I guess they both have shade in the name, so that would explain it. It's kind of got a oily consistency to it. But I think the idea is you put it on, and then if you want less on, you dab your brush off and just kind of suck up the remainder that you don't want. It looks like it's pulling the paint off. Well, because this paint hasn't had long to dry, and I probably need to put down a clear coat between layers. So this is not a good test. So what I need to do is wait for this stuff to dry, do a clear coat, and then experiment with the shades. Let's see, and the last thing I wanted to experiment with was the weathering powders. So let's see. I have this almost black. Boy, I do not see the name of it. Oh, there we go. Smoke. Let's see what happens with this stuff. So one thing I've seen done is, let's see, using a dry brush. Oh, this is a really crappy brush. Let me find a less crappy brush. This'll do. Okay, so actually just putting the powder on dry. You can just kind of smudge it on. Oh, it's really nice. And then you can just rub with your finger to take it off of areas. And then when you want to set it, you use paint thinner, either with a dropper or through an airbrush or just the tip of your brush. And in theory, that cements it down into place. So I want to try that with a lighter color. I still haven't decided if I want to do light in the cracks or dark, or maybe mix it up a bit. I should, I'm going to collect some reference of old cobblestone and castle floors and stuff to see what direction I should go with that. The game art itself is fairly ambiguous. I mean, it's darker cracks, but only slightly. It's hard to tell if that's like shadow from the light, if it's meant to be shadow or if it's actually like a darker mortar. I don't know. So I feel pretty free to experiment and just do what looks most realistic in this case. So I'm mixing this white and this smoke together. This probably isn't white. This is, oh, no, it is literally white. Okay. So I'm trying to get a light gray. I'm thinking, again, maybe 20-30%. Something that's lighter than the thing. Actually, let me try it on this black to see what happens. Well, that's interesting. You get a dry brush effect just by smudging it around. Then I get the creases filled in with a lighter color for free. It's very interesting. I'm not sure that it looks right to have lighter mortar. But this could be a stage 1, and then a stage 2 could be doing the quick shade or a wash or something like that that will fill in the dark areas again. But a nice thing about this is it automatically gives me a really nice varied tonality throughout it. You can see this brick is very light, this one's fairly dark, and mixes all throughout. And mixing the powder like this makes it so that as I dab the brush on, you can see I'm getting variegated spots of it, right? So I kind of get an automatic modeling without having to do much work. And that leaves the cracks really well. I mean, I purposely filled in between the bricks. I wonder if I just go to my dark again. So I put that over it. What do I get? Let's see what happens when I add a little paint thinner. Do not want to break out my airbrush right now, so I'm just going to try the drip method and see how that works. It's definitely pulling some of the color up onto the brush. The concern would be that it's pulling all the color up onto the brush. I can't really tell yet while it's still wet. Let's see what happens when I just touch little spots of the powder on while it's wet. Once I start rubbing it around with the paint thinner on there, it's essentially no different than painting, so I probably should stop doing that since I'm trying to experiment and see what various techniques get me. So I'm gonna set that aside for now. Let's see, was there something else I could try? Oh yeah, I could try I've got this crazy, like, Africa red, orange, or Australia, something like that. Just super saturated earth color. Might as well just see what happens. Why not? Definitely gives a good impression that there's you know, some iron in the rock that's been rusting over the ages. Oh, I just I did that over my paint test. It was so subtle I couldn't tell. So, well, that's good to know. Yeah, I think that amount of brightness between the cracks is probably not what I want. Although, I may experiment with maybe just little spots here and there that could have that. And I can also mix it with my other tones. So let's see, I got brown. Oh, here we go, yeah. I have this dark earth. So I could try a little mix and matching with that. That's a very European, North American, soddy dirt there. So there's the option to do that, to fill in the cracks with a earth tone, and then set that, and then dry brush the gray over. So that's another thing to consider. Once the paint thinner hits that rust and subdues it, it gives it a really nice, subtle tone there. I don't know if it'll stay that way after it's dried, but if it does, I'm definitely going to lean on that, because that's a great look. Alright, I think that's as far as I can go now until all this stuff is really dry, and then we'll continue the experimenting right after this short break. Alright, so I've let these this paint and pigment dry overnight, and what I really should have done was this morning before I left for work, I should have sprayed it with the clear coat so that I can then do the experiments with washes and stuff over it, because if you'll recall, when you put a wash or a shade over paint that hasn't been set or clear coated over, you're going to end up pulling up the paint as well with it. So I'm going to have to clear coat it now, and then I'm going to have to wait another, I don't know, like ideally I would wait another day. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that, I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to do this really stupid waste of time thing that I just want to do because I'm stupid and because I like to waste time. And that is, I want to make these pillars that hold them up look like pillars from the game, because I was doing some research on some walls. I was considering building the wall. He crashes through like 3 walls before you actually fight him, and so I got all this reference for what those walls look like in case I wanted to model them. Actually, that's what all these pieces I made are for, are these walls. And then I kind of sobered up a bit and was like, A, do I really want to spend the amount of time to put more structure on here? And then B, even if I did spend that amount of time, would that not kind of detract from everything else that's going on? I mean, this is already just this massive spectacle of a sculpture, and it's going to have a guy on the top that's supposed, you know, the head of the creature and the guy stabbing his head, that's supposed to be the focus of the piece. And so the more stuff that's going on everywhere else is just going to muddle that. I think, you know, an easy way to figure that out is just to pose him, photograph it, and then just Photoshop in this wall that would stand like this high and be broken down where he like walked through it. And I could just see that way rather than spending who knows how, you know, 20, 30 hours building this other wall. Blah, I say to that, blah. Doesn't mean I won't end up doing it, but right now I'm saying blah. However, back to the time-wasty thing. These pillars have, somewhere I printed, oh yeah, here we go. So, there's these pillars in the game. And they've got this cool kind of design on it. And I was thinking, oh wow, look. These pillars are already very much like these pillars, and I could just have it like broken off like they're ruins or whatever. And that way, the board itself looks kind of cool, and I can photograph it by itself. And I'm also thinking when I'm putting together beauty shots of the piece, I can photograph these without the Colossus, and then in Photoshop just like clone them out into the distance so it looks like he's actually on this massive floor instead of this one little island. Why is it worth it? Probably not. Is any of this worth it? No. What am I doing with my life? I don't know. Can you write to me, please, and tell me what I'm doing with my life? Yeah, so anyway, I don't think that's a huge time investment. The only big concern would be that it makes it hard to put the Colossus on and off if I'm adding any girth to the post. I mean, the other option is that I could grind the little bas relief elements in with a Dremel tool into the metal, which might be a way to go. So as you can see, I textured it and I painted it and I slid them on and off to see exactly how close it needs to come. And it looks like I can see from where the paint got scraped off. Let's check that out. You can see there that it would definitely be cutting it really darn close. I'm not sure if it scraped off because it just kind of wiggles back and forth as you set it on, or if I added, you know, even a millimeter of clay on there, that it would just bind up, right? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, after I spray these guys, I'm going to experiment with grinding on the middle, because why not? I've got nothing else to do for a couple hours while those dry. Well, except, you know, normal stuff that normal people do. But why would I spend any of my life doing normal things that normal people do? Write in and let me know why I would do that. Thanks. Okay, yeah, so just watch the rest. This will be fun. I'm sure of it. I'm not sure, actually.